Josh, great to see you. Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat with me. I always appreciate that. I want to kick off with something that you said to me last time we spoke, which has sort of stuck in my mind ever since we were sort of talking about the things that you're doing. You said to me, and I quote, "Most leaders have their heads stuck in the sand." I thought, well, that's a good place to start. I mean, why do you say that? What do you mean by that? And why does it matter?
Well, do you mind if I set up the story a little bit, but with a
No,
little
go
bit of
ahead. Go
background
ahead.
on
Go
me?
ahead.
So I've always been a bit of an entrepreneur, maybe very much an entrepreneur, where with your U.S. Viewers will understand this, but when I say I filed my first 1040 when I was 11 years old, meaning
Right.
I
Okay.
my first tax filing. Because I've just always I'd get the newspaper stack would hit our garage door at 4 a.m. when I was 11, and I'd wrap those papers and deliver the papers before school, and then after school I'd go mow the neighbors' lawns, and I've just always liked to work and see the result of work, and so that just kept translating in my professional life to starting my own businesses
Mhm.
and I since 99 is when I really uh, had dug in and found some success in that entrepreneurial spirit and have been self-employed essentially until then. Um, and my last organization that I sold back in 2019 was fairly large by the time I left it. And and one of the things that I did in at that organization was really intentionally listen to what my team had to say. You know, we had 20 or 30 people, and it became pretty painfully obvious a few times where I was able to talk to some of the frontline folks that were really turning the screws. And I found out some really powerful things that they knew that leadership didn't. And and so as the leader of the organization, I really dug in deep and sat down with each one of those people and found, man, they had a lot of knowledge and wisdom. Um, and I found out that if you apply that knowledge and wisdom to the organization, it made it a huge difference. And so I went and took that theory out to colleagues and to the broader organization. We'd been bought by a large multinational company, and as floated the idea of running your organization more bottom up. Right. I mean, the top down makes sense. You've got to have a leadership that sets the tone and the vision for the organization. But knowing what's going on at the ground level and using that to set strategy, I thought, wow, I'm really behind on this because it took me 3 or 4 years to realize how much value there was in the front line. So I started talking to colleagues and again people at the organization and that was where I realized how firmly leaders had their head in the sand.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, I get what you're saying, but let me ask you something. When you say what's going on in the front, I mean, what do you mean? In a practical sense, what do you mean? Just give us a couple of examples of the sorts of information that perhaps leaders don't know or think they know and perhaps get it wrong. I mean, give us some examples.
well, what's going on? So yeah, it's very contextual. It matters from one organization to the next, right? But one of the things that I knew was happening, but I didn't know the detail. I didn't know the why behind these things were happening. I didn't know how to fix it. Is that in that organization, we had a process of essentially opening a case or a file and working that through. to the point where it would close that file. Okay, and there was lots of steps in the middle of that, many steps, and lots of interaction with different people, both the customer themselves, who wasn't the payer. So this is sort of in the U.S. healthcare system. There's a lot of complexity there about who pays and who administers and all of that. And so it was in that web and of taking these cases from A to Z that I knew there was some things that we were missing that we were doing very inefficiently. I didn't know exactly what they were or why they were that way, but I knew there was issues. So that's where I started, Paul. When I say I wanted to know what's going on, I started by asking very strategic, intentional questions about that process as it applied to my business, right? Like I couldn't ask those same questions at a McDonald's franchise. The workers there, their eyes would glaze over, right? So these are very intentional questions for me to drill out or draw out, excuse me, and drill down on the process that we had at that organization and where the holes were that we weren't seeing. I wasn't seeing as a leader, and it was
It's a
enlightening.
very interesting point you make there. I'll tell you why, because I think every business is different because it's led by different people, it's got different resources, it's got, it's focused on different customers, it's got different proposition, different technology. Every single business is different, which means that the kind of formulas that you sometimes hear that are used to that people talk about around building or scaling a business, I'm not a real believer in those formulas because building a business is it's about you building this business in this context, isn't it? Which is, and so what you're saying is you can't really do that unless you've got that context specific information. I mean, have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, there's a framework to building businesses where, you've got to that would apply cookie cutter, I would say I mean, there's a certain way to handle accounting and all those sorts of
Yeah.
basic building block stuff, right? But there is certainly a point where the granularity of what you specifically do becomes very, very important. I mean, the process of how you do the work is everything in the end. And the better and more efficient and more effective you make that process, the more successful your company is going to be. And that's where I found that leading from on high in terms of, okay, this is the way the process should be. There's a huge knowledge gap there.
Yeah.
And it's pretty egotistic for a strategic leader to think that they know how to run the business at the ground frontline level. And that's where I think leaders have their head in the sand. They a lot of leaders think and there's a lot of smart leaders out there. Listen, I'm not putting all all of leaders corporate leadership in a bucket of not being sensitive to what the front line knows or not being smart or anything like that. But there's definite a general gap
Yeah.
between what leadership thinks should happen at the front line and what probably should be happening at the front line. And there's just not a lot of appetite for top leadership to listen directly to what those turning the screws know and have to contribute,
And
my
your
opinion.
technology helps resolve that. I mean, that's what your proposition does, isn't it?
Absolutely. So what I did, and I'll tell you what the viewers right now might be screaming at their screen, going, "Well, isn't that what the management layer is for?" Right? That's why you hire these people and you pay them good money, is so that they can manage that people, process, and technology, and that should filter up into the decision making of the organization. But there is so many blockers to that process. There's egos at every level, right? I mean, I could tell you two or three stories from way back when I was working at and we have restaurants, fast food called El Pollo Loco. I worked there for as a teenager for a while. And I had some great ideas about how to make the ordering process better, but my team lead didn't want anyone to look smarter than him that was below him, right? I mean, and so anything I brought to him, it never went any higher. And that's a fast food analogy, but I think it happens even in the biggest organizations today. Multi-billion dollar organizations, there's a layer between decision makers and the people doing the actual work. And there's all kinds of reasons that the wisdom, the collective knowledge of the workforce doesn't make it to those that are making decisions about policy and process.
Yeah. So let me just take you one step back to your, before you got into this. I mean, I always think it's interesting when I talk to entrepreneurs about why they've decided to build a business because they're all smart people. They could earn lots of money working for a big corporation without any shadow of a doubt. I mean, why did you want to build a business in particular? I mean, what is it about that? I know you mentioned that you kind of got into it when you were younger, but what is it about building a business that kind of motivates you, that excites you?
If you don't mind, what I'd like to talk about is why I built this business,
Yeah,
this business called Listen in our platform Blind Spot. So when I found out, when I turned that corner and I said, these folks must know a lot that I don't know, with their hands in it all the time. I had a team meeting and I said, guys and girls, this is what I think. I really want to hear from you. I value what you have to say. Here's my cell phone number. It's up on the screen. You call me anytime, day or night. I'd love to hear what you have to say. How many calls do you think I got?
no idea. A lot?
Zero.
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 Really? Okay.
No, that's right. That's right. Zero calls. So I thought, okay, that's too impersonal, and it's a phone. So the next meeting I said, okay, nobody took me up on that. So my door is a literally open door policy now. I literally screwed my door to the wall. I said, if you want to tell me anything, come and let's talk about it. I want to hear what you know. Guess how many people walked through the door? Zero. And so I realized, there's a barrier. There's a real barrier here between what the front line knows and what the executive level knows, and it's not getting there. And I started to really dig into why that might be. And the answer, when I started asking questions, the
Mm,
path was always directed to, we have our surveys, right? We have HR does the survey. And I thought, oh, okay, great. We're already set up to do this. That's why they're not coming to me directly. We have systems for this, right? So I said, yeah, let's take a look at the survey and see what it's asking. So when I dug into the survey, all of the questions in the survey, without exception, were related to what the business wanted to learn about the employees.
mm.
And that's important. It's good. We want to make sure employees are satisfied, that the culture is where it should be. All of that stuff. It makes a huge difference to all organizations. But what was entirely missing, and is still entirely missing, is, well, what do the employees know about the business? So that's the reverse, right? The HR surveys are asking, what do you know business about the employee? But I wanted to know what the employee knew about the business that we maybe didn't.
Yep.
And so that's when I dug in, and I didn't create a survey. I didn't do anything elegant. At that point, all I did was the questions that I wanted answered, I put in a spreadsheet as the header. And I gave it to each of my managers and I said, will you distribute this amongst the team, collect what they have to say, in the rows, but beneath the column headers, and get this back to me filled out, complete voluntary. They don't have to, if they don't have anything to share about that question, they don't have to share it. But what I got back was absolute pure gold, Paul. I got back a spreadsheet of insight that I had no visibility to from that top level. And when I applied what I learned from what the employees knew about the business, the performance of the organization just hockey sticked. You know, engagement went up because, well, you can imagine someone's listening to your idea and not just listening and giving you lip service. Some of those ideas that were said were put into practice. So now, as a frontline person, you know that if you have something to contribute, someone will listen. And occasionally, that thing that they heard will also be actually applied to the policy and process of the organization. And you now see that happen in your daily work life. That's engaging for employees to know, hey, what I say might become part of the steel thread of this organization. So engagement went up. Our efficiency in those cases and went way up. That just allowed us to produce more widgets in less time, and that helps profit. And then as we got better and we produced a better product, customer usage went up too. So revenue went up. So all of the big numbers, all the KPIs that leadership really cares about, got better when I took what I learned from the organization and applied it.
Yeah. And that was the genesis of this business that you've developed. That's why.
That was the genesis.
And I mean, the other thing people say to me is that building a business, I mean, it's like riding a roller coaster. You know, good days, bad days. I mean, what is it about this specific business? I know you've touched on some of the things that are important, but what is it about this specific business that gets you out of bed every day to ride the roller coaster? And what is it that really motivates you? Why does this matter to you? I suppose is what I'm asking.
It matters to me because we're leaving so much on the table,
Yeah.
in both for leadership and frontline. Like I just mentioned, there's so much that the frontline has to contribute. And if we just listen, and I know leaders are, this is the part where their head is firmly in the sand. Leaders are sometimes, a lot of times, afraid to listen well because there's a lot of ideas out there too.
Mm.
I mean, you're not going to get 100% gold out of when you ask people, hey, what do you know that I might not know that could help the organization? But there's plenty of gold in there to make it worthwhile to take your head out of the sand and say, yeah, I really want to listen. So what gets me out of bed in the morning is I'm on a mission to try to get leaders to understand the value they already have in the people that they've handpicked, right? With great care. I mean, the recruiting process and the interviewing process, and when we take all of this time and energy and effort to get the right people, and then we shove them in this box and put the lid on it and hope they just sort of do their thing in that spot. And that is crazy to me. I think we have these resources. We have the human resources, and we at great length and cost, we bring these resources in, and the fact that we're not exploiting what they know at every opportunity is
And why
crazy.
do you think it is that managers don't do that? I mean, I agree with your premise that it doesn't happen. If it did happen, it would create a lot of value. I mean, I get that. Why doesn't it happen? I mean, you're describing, I mean, somebody said to me the other day that one of the things that good managers develop is the ability to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And in this setting, you know, it's uncomfortable hearing negative feedback sometimes, even though the negative stuff actually is the stuff that you want. Um, why is it? Why do you feel managers don't want to do that? Because it's not a difficult process, but people don't want to do it, do they? Why not?
The excuse I hear a lot of times is busy, and people are busy. I mean, your schedule's full already, and so adding another layer of taking the time to intentionally listen and maybe do some things with what you learn adds a cycle potentially to your day. So that's part of it. Another is like we talked about earlier. There's ego involved.
Mm.
Um, there's leaders that don't think they need the help or don't need to hear from the organization because they know better. Um, and that's a blocker, right? Or
Mm.
the old telephone game, right? I mean, how many times have you played the game where you have, six people in a room and you whisper to the person next to you
Yeah.
something, and by the time it gets to number six, it's something completely different. And that happens in organizations too. The front line has a great idea. It goes to, I mean, think about the layers to the team lead, to the supervisor, to the manager, to the director, to the VP that actually makes that process decision. By the time it gets there, it might be so misconstrued or added to or subtracted from that sort of clay layer of filtering. It distorts things, and then you lose a lot of value by the time you get to it. So there's a lot of people have history when they're trying to apply what I'm talking about, and it doesn't work out real well sometimes. And so they
And
they
how do you help people overcome that problem? I mean, I take your point about egos, I take your point about the extra work it can create, I take your point about challenging the status quo, and sometimes people don't like to do that. How do you help people overcome those barriers?
Yeah, so what that spreadsheet, let's go back to that spreadsheet I built. It allowed people, because they knew it was anonymous, to say what they really wanted to say. And there's some fear, right, of, let's say, retribution or retaliation, where if they said something negative about a leader that's reading that, if someone said, "Hey, Josh, you're the problem here," right? You don't do X, Y, or Z. That would be hard for some folks to verbalize. If they had any thought that the leader reading it might be able to recognize who they are. So that's a blocker, of course. But the other one, and the one I found that is more powerful, um, even than that. And what we do is we assure anonymity, and we can talk a
Right.
little bit more about how we do that. But the bigger blocker is that people don't want to sound uh, dumb. They don't want to sound like they've had a stupid idea. So if Josh tells Paul, "Hey, I've got this idea, I think will really help with our process," and Paul says, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard," that'll kill you from ever having another suggestion again, right? And so anonymity is we have basically four core principles to what we're doing, and anonymity is one of those legs that we stand on for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, let me ask you about the process of business, of building a business. So, I mean, one of the things that's interesting about today compared to, say, 30 or 40 years ago when I started in business is that essentially you're building a business in an environment in which you are scrutinized. I mean, I call it building a business in the age of social media. I mean, you know, people know what you're doing. They can go to your website, they can talk to your people, that, there's stuff going on all the social media platforms. I mean, staff can talk, customers talk. I mean, what's your take on those sort of challenges, and how are they best managed? I mean, given that you want people to be open.
Yeah, we want to be open, but like I just said, it's there's anonymity, and our platform is very different from what many people think it is when we first try to explain it. If you and I are on the front line and we have something to share, leadership sees what we have to say, but we don't see what each other had to say. It's not a community where you share and everybody sees what everyone else says. It's a direct line from front line to decision maker. And that's one of the big differentiators between what we're doing and what a lot of other people that have sort of tried to do what we're doing is we want to give those at the top that can make the decisions to change things, the direct line of communication. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but in terms of this age of social media, yeah, this is not Facebook for business. This is a very intentional strategic intelligence tool that's meant to extract high value insight from the people that are right up in that business, that who live and breathe it every day. and who know where the skeletons are buried and why they're there and how to get them out of there and fix some of the biggest business problems that organizations have.
And presumably, if they've got frustrations, they want to tell somebody because they want to get something done about it, don't they? Presumably. So there's a motivation there, I would have thought.
Yeah, and we don't have our heads so far in the sand to think that that doesn't happen today in business to some degree, right? I mean, there are healthy organizations where someone on the front line can have a frustration and voice that frustration upstream to whoever they report to, and potentially get something done. But we found, we did 6 months of research before we ever decided to launch our blind spot platform. And we found that both the organizations that are healthy enough to be able to do that without the front line having any reticence or pause at sharing that way is pretty small. And then those organizations that have a systemic way, a pathway for that to happen in a safe way is even smaller. So it's pretty rare for anyone to work in an organization today where they can freely share what they know about the business, especially something negative, like you just said, and be able to do that effectively and not worry about consequences from it.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think it's worse now because social media is people are so cautious about saying what they really think on social media that it becomes a habit, I think, to
Ah,
and sometimes caution is not what you need when you're trying to gather intelligence about what's working and what's not working. What you want to know is what's not working. So I think it's an interesting kind of dichotomy, really, because the culture, you've got to be so careful. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day who were really worried about being cancelled. And you think, well, that idea wasn't around 20 years ago. It affects
sure.
people quite a lot now. So some interesting challenges there. Let me just change tack a second. You mentioned about customers a minute ago. I mean, tell me how customers react to this. I mean, do they know this? Do they see the value of this? The kind of organization's customers. I mean, is there a play there about finding out what they think?
Yeah, that's back to your opening premise about leaders having their heads in the sand. I've learned that the hard way as we brought this to market. There's a whole lot of leadership out there that wants nothing to do with it. And so at some point, we'll have a stronger marketing campaign to try to change some minds. But for right now, what we're doing is finding leaders that embrace what we're doing, that really want to be different, that want to pioneer a different way of running their organization. And so these first few customers that we've had are definitely fit in that mold where they're leaders that recognize the value of the collective knowledge of their workforce and want to leverage that into professional success for the organization. And so um, and I would say one of the biggest effects that we have right off the bat is think about if you're a leader of an organization and you're about to put blind spot into play into the company, the first thing you've got to do is introduce it, right? And so you as a leader are going to get in front of the organization or leadership team, and you're going to say, "Hey, everybody, guess what? We value you as an employee, as a partner in this. We value what you know and what you have to say. We want to hear it." And we're going to do some things with what we learn, with what you have to share. How many times have you worked at a company, Paul, where that's happened?
Well, you mean me personally?
You personally.
Yeah, I mean, probably the best experience I had of being an employee. I mean, I've had quite a few experiences that weren't great being an employee because I'm not a great employee. But I have had an experience where the CEO was actually very pro. I mean, he didn't use technology to do it, but he was very open and very curious about what people thought. And it's a very powerful motivate has a powerful and motivating effect. Was my experience.
The stories that we hear are similar to yours. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but one. And occasionally Well, mo more often than not, it's zero. The answer is how many times have you heard that from leaders at your organization? More often than not, it's zero. Occasionally, it's one. Um, and so what happens is when leadership gets in front of the workforce and says, "This is our stance, and this is how much we value you," culture just goes like this, right now, before you've done anything, because you've said, "Hey, I'm committed to you. I know you're committed to what you're doing at this organization. Let's make that work together." And it will engage the people the moment you give them the permission and the pathway,
Mm.
right, to share what they know. And then when these customers start hearing things, and this isn't a real one, but it's the example I always use of if six or seven people talk about how they really want to have more Mars bars, or Snickers in the break room, go put a basket of Snickers in the break room. It'll cost you about $15 a week. If people aren't going to take them all and go home with them, it's not going to cost you that much. But what happens is the organization sees that there was something that they asked for. They felt like they could ask for it, right? They're not going to go to HR and ask, "I'd love to have some Snickers in the break room." They'd be laughed at their way out the door, right? And so they have this freedom to ask for little things and big things. And if you deliver some wins on those little things right away, what's happened with our customers is they see things the phrase they use is people walk a little taller and get their shoulders back a little bit more, their heads up high, because they feel like they're valued, they're heard, and what they say will actually have an effect in the organization. So before you've even done anything really that strategic, or that foundational, it makes a difference in the company.
And let me just switch from customers to markets. So, one of the things that's interesting about this particular piece of technology that you've developed and the particular approach you're using is how you scale that globally, because you're doing business in, I don't know, Singapore, very different from doing business in LA because of the kind of cultural nuances involved. I mean, how do you see those sorts of things impacting on the way your tech is used, on the way your approach is used, which is essentially to listen and to use that feedback to drive improvement? How do you see those cultural nuances kind of fitting into that process?
Part of our initial research, we studied well, two organizations, frankly, out of Japan,
Right.
fairly extensively because they've implemented this concept of Kenzin. I hope I got that right. I
Yeah,
believe it's
yeah,
called.
yeah, yeah.
And back in the 90s, Mazda was having some trouble financially, or just not hitting their numbers, or whatever it was. And so they opened up the floodgates and said, "We want to just hear whatever you've got to say." And they got something like, 100,000 suggestions. And they put 30% of them into work.
Mm.
And what they found is an exponential growth in that next period. So there's some cultures, and Toyota does it today. Toyota embraces this kind of, I mean, if you have something to say at Toyota, they give you the pathway in order to share what you have to share, and they invest in the time to investigate all of those suggestions. And so culturally, yeah, it makes a difference. We haven't tried to go to Japan yet because we only have it written in English at this point. Um, but yeah, there's some cultures that embrace the idea of listening to their workforce more than others, and we're pretty early in this journey still, Paul. So we haven't really stretched our wings to your neck of the woods or
I
Australia
mean,
or anything
what was
like that.
behind my question was whether you think listening is going to be as powerful in different cultures as it is in, if you like, Anglo-Saxon Western kind of culture. I mean, you know, and it's interesting that I mean, you're alluding to the fact that the Japanese are actually already reasonably good at it, aren't they? I mean, you know, I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in different cultures because they are, if people are more open to being, talking about their mistakes and failures in some cultures than in others. and so that'll have an impact, I guess. That was what was sort of behind my
I,
question. Did you
I
think?
would imagine those countries and cultures where, for instance, child labor is much more acceptable than others, would probably not be as inclined to care what the employee base has to say. I'm making a giant assumption there. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you know anything about the cultural workforces, but yeah, we probably would not be. Shoot, Paul, even in these Western cultures in the US, we've had an uphill battle, frankly, to convince a lot of organizations that their frontline people know some things that are highly valuable and would equate to a giant jump in the performance as a company. And
And
they
where does
ran.
it's interesting that in America you've had that. You would think, I mean, my experience with the US companies is that they're interested in anything that will improve productivity and therefore the bottom line. I mean, I'm surprised that there's a lot of resistance, given that that's what you're saying it will do. I mean, what do you think is behind that resistance? Just because they haven't done it that way and it's in the past, or I mean, what's behind that?
The other thing that America is sort of known for, and I know this because I've spent a lot of time in Germany and I have a lot of German friends, and they like to, I'm not going to say make fun, but they like to talk about how Americans work from 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night a lot of time. I mean, we tend to burn a lot of the midnight oil, where other countries, especially I would say Western Europe, not so much. And I don't want to overgeneralize anything, but and there's far fewer holidays. Generally, we don't take August off like a lot of European countries. And so the resistance that I've personally seen, and a lot of that is time. While our tool is extremely efficient, and we're using human business intelligence, but we're using AI to distill that intelligence into really powerful insights and action plans that we actually can generate. So we make it easy to go from listening to doing things with what you heard. The American workforce is wrung out in terms of available time. And so you really have to be able to prove your return on investment, and be able to show that it's really a big leverage of their investment of time in terms of returns.
Mm.
And
I mean,
it's
the thing that was going through my mind as you were speaking is I know what you mean about people in the US, working really hard, spending a lot of hours at work, if you like, investing a lot of time in work. I mean, the thing that was in my mind actually is whether their ability, because they're so tired, whether their ability to reflect, because I mean, there's no point having the data unless you spend a bit of time reflecting on it, and therefore, what do we need to do to address these issues? I mean, I always wonder whether people recognize the importance of taking a bit of time to reflect on what they've learned, the information that's come in, as part of how you then make changes. And I wonder whether sometimes people are so busy running around doing stuff, focusing on the action, they don't have the space or the peace and quiet, perhaps, to reflect. And I wonder whether that has an impact. Whereas in Japan, there's more of a culture of spending time reflecting, and
yeah.
and I wonder whether that, because and that's not about the quantity of data. It's about what you then do with it when you've got it in your, on your desk, if you see what I mean.
It's a great point. I mean, talk about hardworking people. And again, generally, I haven't spent a lot of time in Japan, but I mean, they also have an incredible reputation for putting in long hours, right? But to your point, I think a lot of those hours, not a lot, I think at least some of those hours are hours set aside to intentionally do these mental exercises, right? Instead of just chasing and putting out fires, to really think, okay, what can I proactively do to improve how this organization performs? But one of the things just to back up what you're saying, one of the things that we've learned in the implementation process of our platform is that KPIs are one of the things that we've found is an unexpected value, understanding KPIs of our tool. And so what I mean by that is organizations are generally run by key performance indicators. And what we found is that our tool is very helpful in going in. What we do is we work with the organization and get context about what they do and what their objectives are and what they're trying to accomplish and their vision for where they want to go. And then our system goes in and asks very intentional, systematic questions of certain groups in the organization to extract high value intelligence from that group. And what we found is that companies see a KPI that's moved. And right now, a lot of those companies, they're really not sure why.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
takes quite a bit of digging. And there's a lot of, you would think, okay, well, sales are down 10% in the Western region. And you would think that whoever's in charge of that KPI could go and ask the manager, why are sales down 10%? And that manager would know, first of all, the reasons, and tell you the truth behind that. But again, there's a whole lot of self-protection, preservation, ego and reputation, where that process becomes a little harder than it sounds like. So what our tool does is goes and asks all the customer facing teams in that Western region, hey, we're down 10%. Can you tell us why? And you get immediate understanding
Yeah.
of not only why that number changed, but how to fix it
Yeah.
according to the people that are in that front line. Now, I tell you all this to go back to your original question. We found that in that process of having a profound impact on KPIs and understanding why they're doing what they're doing, we found that companies start to dig into these KPIs and go, why are we asking that question?
Yeah. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
instance, we had a company where they had a KPI of their deal close rate, right? They had a percentage. But it turns out that that deal close rate was highly dependent on their deal proposed rate.
Yeah.
So if you don't propose a deal in time, right, for whenever the cutoff is, you're not going to win that deal for sure, right? So we've found a lot of value of bringing what we call blind spot certified partners. So they're basically consultants that have been through our certification training. And they come in and they say, well, let's look at your KPIs. Let's make sure you're looking at the right indicators here. And those consultants come in and they're able to set this up so that it addresses absolutely exactly what's going on. Because every company's different. I don't need to tell you that, you know that. And how they use the tool and the processes that they insert our platform into. It takes some thinking through, but if you come in with a partner that can sort of break down the business and say, why are you doing it this way, and integrate the platform into the processes, so it's not such a sort of awkward thing to have to fit into what they're doing today because they're not used to relying on what the organization says. It is helpful. It is helpful to come to bring our platform in with some consulting service at the same time.
Yeah. No, I can see that because it's about helping people to implement it, isn't it, and get it right, and that's what really matters. Let me ask you a little bit. You've already touched on the role that AI plays. I mean, to what extent is AI the thing that is, does it drive your platform, and in what way does it drive your work? The reason I'm asking is that AI is so different now to the way it was a couple of years ago. I mean, it's really, the rate of improvement is phenomenal. I mean, how is that playing out in terms of the way people are, or your platform is developing, and how people are deploying the platform? I mean, is AI having a big impact on that?
It's a great question, and it's really relevant because we're actually starting to get very busy. And
Mm.
here's why. I think 2025 was the year of you have to have AI,
Yeah,
right? In one way, shape, or form. You can't be the company that's not using AI, right? You can't have that reputation. And so organizations brought in AI uses that may or may not have been all that effective or efficient, but they've checked that box. Do you use AI in your organization? Yeah, check. What organizations are learning is that there's limitations to AI.
Mm.
So that pendulum swung all the way over here. You have to have AI, but you can't entirely trust AI completely. We still have to have that human business intelligence
Mm.
component to make AI as effective and accurate, frankly, as you can be. I'll give you an example. There's lots of apps where you can write an email, for instance, or a proposal or whatever, right? The large language model is
Yeah.
is very helpful. And it'll create whatever you ask it to create. But I've never once had AI create something for me, write something for me, and me just hit send as is. Never, right? It requires that human intervention, that human intelligence to come in and say, okay, AI's got me started here, but I need to bring back reality and bring back qualitative understanding of what I'm trying to do here to really make this as good as I can make it. And so what we're benefiting from is that this is a perfect marriage of exactly what we're talking about there is we're using AI extensively to manage what we hear, right? To distill it, to group it together, to understand what are the key insights, what are the risks and opportunities that are coming from these insights that are coming in, what are the strategic action plans that can be made from what's being learned. All of that is happening in our proprietary AI algorithms. But all of that underlying data to what the AI is doing is straight out of employees' mouths,
Mm.
right? It's 100% human, contextual to what the organization is doing. And so when you bring these two together, AI and the context,
Mm.
human context, human intelligence, it's very, very powerful.
Mm. I mean, and it's powerful in the context of that organization, isn't it? I mean, it's not something that you can necessarily apply anywhere else. It's about getting this organization performing more effectively, which seems to
You
be
nailed it.
partly what makes it more valuable, really. Yeah, no, I can see that. Let me just ask about your journey. I mean, I'll just ask a couple of questions before we wind up. I mean, when you look back on the journey that you've been on, I mean, it sounds like a pretty interesting experience you've had building this company. I mean, what would you say you've learned? What are the big things that you've learned on the journey?
We started with leaders have their heads in the sand.
Yeah.
And I was very surprised, Paul, at the resistance of executive leadership to listening to what their people had to say. And it was never something that I was against as a business leader, but it was never something that I embraced either, right? And it wasn't until that sort of aha moment when I said, let's just ask some really great one question at a time, qualitative question. Let's get it out there and see what the people know about what I would like to learn more about. That I understood the value of that. The resistance to, again, it's mind-boggling to me. You said it.
Mm.
In America, the business leaders will jump over their own mother's body to make another buck, right? You're like, why is there resistance to this? And that's the confusing part that I really I'm trying to still unwind is I'm telling leaders, this is what happened in my own organization. This is what's happening in our other customers. Would you like to experience the same amount of customer retention, increase in customer retention, increase in operational efficiency? Decrease in compliance issues? Do you want to understand KPIs? Do you want to be able to predict the direction KPIs are going before they even go there? And the answer is yes. And then I say the secret is you already have the knowledge under your nose, under your roof. It exists in the people that run this business day in and day out. Let our tool go get it for you, and you use it to exponentially increase the performance of this business, and their head goes straight in the sand, and they act like, I'm speaking from Mars.
It's
Um,
funny how humans are, isn't it?
we're all busted in one way or another, but it has been surprising the resistance to a formula that I have that will increase your performance. And assumingly that if your organization performs better, you as an individual have incentives. I'm assuming, right, to make the organization run better. So that's the I haven't learned it yet. So you said, what have I learned? I haven't learned it yet. That's the journey I'm on, and the thing I'd really like to learn, Paul, is where is that? What's the fear?
Yeah.
Um,
And what you identified is a sales challenge that is,
yes.
you know, blocking your ability to build the business to where you wanted to get it to. And it'd be interesting to see if you do manage to figure that out. I mean, I think that'd be a very interesting conversation to have because it's not that dissimilar to some of the things I hear from other people that are bringing new, innovative, exciting technologies to market. And people are saying, "Oh, I'm not sure about that." It's an interesting one that when you think they would be. Let me ask you that: if you were to go back to the beginning there and you were going to start again, knowing what you know now, is there anything you'd do differently?
Well, that's a great. You know what? I'll tell you. I'll go back. There is something I've really learned, and we've learned it fairly recently here, and it answers both questions and the one you just asked there too. We thought that this was a tool that would have to be managed by HR,
Mm,
because you're going out and asking the employee base, you're accessing the employee base. And so we started there in terms of our target market was HR as a department. And it's super valuable to HR if they choose to own it,
mm,
because what they get to do then is they get to take in insights that have value to all sorts of parts of the organization. So it gives them the ability to say, hey, operations, we learned this really great thing about this process. Here's some great intelligence. Or sales teams, this is what's happening with the customer experience where you're losing them, and during the deployment process, we learned this is HR giving sales and operations and all the other departments fantastic intelligence on how they can improve the performance of their part of the business. And so we thought this is finally going to get HR to the strategic table, right? They're always complaining about how tactical they are. And they do. They do the tactical stuff amazing, right? Like your paycheck is 100% right every 2 weeks. Your benefits are taken right. That's hard stuff to do. But they feel like they're mired in the administration, and so we thought this is their way to owning strategy in the organization. It fell flat. Now, HR is another one of those organizations where they're just so busy keeping their head just above water,
mm,
that adding this to what was difficult. And so we've gone and done a lot of market testing, and what we've learned, and the real traction that we have is in that KPI management, is where our foot is in the door.
yeah.
And our target market today is CFOs, finance leaders who live and die by that 90-day shot clock, right? That especially the U.S. is on, and a lot of the rest of the world, where they're responsible for the numbers. And the fact that we can provide some crystal balling a little bit on what those numbers might be trending to before they even go there, and the fact that we can provide quick answers as to why KPIs have shifted when they do, is very, very
I can
valuable to them.
imagine they'll be
And
attracted to that because
and so we go in on the finance side and say we can help with your KPIs, but then operations goes, wait, what's going on here? And they say, hey, I want to ask some questions of my team members. And then sales goes, wait a minute, you can help me retain more customers. And so we've sort of had to adopt this land and expand approach, right? We land on the thing that is the sharpest stick in the side, right? The finance guys, they want these KPIs. They want to know exactly what's going on right now. And as that is realized in the organization, its utilization gets expanded.
yeah, and the CFO. I mean, they're often the gatekeepers for the to access the budget and all the rest of it, aren't they? So they're good people to start with. But it's interesting that you would think it would be HR. but that isn't necessarily the right way forward, isn't it? Let me ask you another question. In terms of you, what's the best piece of advice you've been given?
I've been given I don't know if I haven't been given any great piece of advice, I'd say recently that really resonates, but throughout my 25 years of starting and scaling and running businesses, there's five sort of basic concepts I'd say that I've latched onto. And I don't know if you or your audience may know who a guy named Alex Hormozy is. He really has verbalized these five things better than I could in my brain, and so I sort of borrow them from him now. But the first is you always promise late and deliver early,
Right.
right? Never overpromise, always overperform. Always test small and then bet big. So, when we did these, when we went for the HR market, we didn't go whole hog and put all of our budget in it. We said, okay, let's go see what happens. Um, Give first and ask last. So you provide something of value to that potential customer, like this podcast, right? Maybe there's something that they can learn, and it doesn't cost them anything to learn that, and then they dig in a little bit more. What you got to ignore opinions and trust fact. Data is king, and so you have to be careful about the people that are in your ear, and always promote and never slander. That's like when you talked about potential competitors in the marketplace. I welcome come the more people preaching what we're trying to do, which is a big change for especially for U.S. organizations to say, hey, we're we're not going to be solely top down in running this organization. That still exists, but we want to take what the front line knows and be able to apply that.
Mm.
That's a big deal. So anybody that's competing with us and maybe taking some of our sales dollars away, we're cheerleaders because they're promoting something that we think is super valuable to corporate America, all organizations across the world that's not being used today.
And if there was one piece of advice you'd offer a rookie CEO starting out, I mean, given your journey, what would that one piece of advice be?
Hire well, take your time, and those positions where you have the thumbs up and thumbs down, really do all of the due diligence and make sure you are 100% comfortable with who you're hitching your wagon to because you really are. I mean, it's a marriage of sorts, right? I mean, you're going to spend a whole lot more time with that person, generally speaking, than you are your spouse. And so it's hire well, hire people that you want diverse opinions.
Mm.
That for sure. You don't want yes people, but you do need people that are aligned with the way you do things and with your mission and vision. So.
Mm.
Yeah, hire
A
well.
great piece of advice, really. Get the right people on the bus. I mean, if you get the right people on the bus, you're gonna bus will go faster, won't it? So I mean, it's a
And
good.
it's all about the people in the end, right? If you haven't got that from this talk today,
You
I don't know
never
how to
will.
help you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, Josh, thank you for that. I mean, what a great, what a great little story there, and some really useful bits of wisdom. So, really appreciate you taking time to come and have a chat with us, and good luck going forward.
Yeah, thank you for finding me, for giving us a platform to talk, and maybe this will be one in a series.
Let's hope so. All right, see
Sounds
you
good.
soon.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.